good morning from the park. Brian of London here. I am sorry I missed last week. It was pouring with rain here in Tel Aviv, and that's cleared up. It's sunny. It's on the chilly side. Somewhere, I don't know, 12, 13 degrees, something like that. I haven't even thought to look. And last week was, all tied up with Christmas for you outside. So even though that didn't make much of a difference to the calendar here, things changed around a bit. So I want to lead off by, there's hundreds of videos on this. I've watched many of them. There are some excellent videos. I might try and link some when I post this on YouTube later to some of the better ones. The headline story is Patreon booted off Sargon of Akkad. He was only the most recent. Before that had been Milo and Lawrence Southern and Robert Spencer and too many others to mention. There's an obvious push. Now, lots of people have done some great work in figuring out what's going on behind the scenes. And behind the scenes, it would seem that the entire financial system, or especially the consumer boundary of the financial system, and by that I mean the companies that you and I have to use in order to spend our own money. And those are generally, internationally, MasterCard, Visa. There's others, Amex, which is big in America, but not as big elsewhere. But MasterCard, Visa are the two huge ones. And then PayPal is another layer that comes between you and those two. All of these companies seem to have been captured by the far left, the social justice warriors. And that's entirely explicable if you watch my video on Mundia and Modia, though the author has said I should be calling it Mundia and Modia. Mundia for mundane, for things that are ordinary, but watch Mundia and Modia, and I will sit down at some point with David Boxenhorn and explain even more. But that theory tells you why these companies have been captured by social justice warriors. And the real reason is that once they became so successful, they became money printing factories, they became detached from the reasons for their own financial success, which means that they can divert energy towards doing bullshit like taking Sargon of Akkad off their platform and then wandering off to go and see Subscribestar, which was a competitor to Patreon, that 3 or 4 days later just was completely cut from the international payment system. And that's a specific case that a chap in America called Leo Lessing, who has a YouTube channel which is an excellent but very technically detailed. He makes sort of sometimes overly long videos under the name YouTuber Law. He has taken it upon himself, raised some money with some donations, and he's doing the research to write to the Federal Trade Commission in America specifically about the way in which Subscribestar was taken down immediately after Sargon transferred over to Subscribestar. I also opened an account on Subscribestar, picked up a couple or three people, and suddenly they can't take payments or make payouts to creators. Just a brand new startup just cut at the knees by the big boys, it would seem, because they gave Sargon of Akkad, an English liberal guy who said one bad word on a podcast 9 months ago, that's a reason to take them out of business in America. It's crazy. Now, I'll just tell you some of the other parallel streams that I'm working on. So, on the 3rd of January, which happens to be the 10th anniversary of the creation of the very first block of the Bitcoin blockchain, I used Bitcoin myself for the first time to actually do something that I needed doing. So I wanted to move £1,000 from my British standard bank account, which I've had since I was, 12 or something. It's the only bank account number that I remember in my head because I've known it so long. I wanted to move £1,000 from there to my account in Israel, which I can do a number of ways. The normal way is to go onto the NatWest account in the UK and to initiate an international bank transfer. And for that, NatWest will charge me £22 for 3 days or £30 for 2 days. and then there'll be receiving fees at the bank in Israel, and then there'll be a currency exchange. So I thought I wanted to see, this is a use case for Bitcoin. Now, it's a bit of a fiddle to set up, because I had to set up an account with, I used somebody called Coinbase, which is one of the biggest. I set up an account with Coinbase in the UK. I had to prove all of my identity, including my address, and I gave them my Israeli address, which was tricky because they wanted proof of address in Israel that's less than 3 months old, but all of my proofs of address are in Hebrew, and nobody at Coinbase can read Hebrew, so I was back and forwards with them for days trying to figure that one out, without going to, otherwise I'd have to spend, $75 and go to a lawyer to have him countersign the address on this electricity bill is exactly as written in my, it's a crazy system. Got through all of that. Finally, I did it on Wednesday, whatever night it was. Go on Coinbase, go on NatWest in Britain, send £1,000 to Coinbase. £1,000 arrives at Coinbase, no fees at that point. I want to turn the £1,000 to Bitcoin. All of this happened in the space of 2 hours. So once the money is on Coinbase, I buy Bitcoin. I get about a third of a Bitcoin, 1/3, 0.29, and then lots of numbers. We'll take a break at this point in the story. Okay, so I am now the proud owner of 1/3 of a Bitcoin in England on a website in the UK. They charged me, I think it was about a £14 fee. So my £1,000 became 985. And then you go in and you put in another Bitcoin address. And I sent it actually to 2 Bitcoins. I sent about £900 of it to a currency exchange in Israel called Bit2C. And I sent the balance, just to have some pocket money to play around with, to a private wallet that sits on software on my Mac that I've had for years and years and years. Because I did experiment with Bitcoin in 2011, but never got much and never kept much. I'm not looking at this as an investment. It's just a way to move money. So I put in 2 addresses, I hit send, and instantly, 5 seconds later, this software on my computer says, you've just received some Bitcoin. It's like magic. Wow. And over the next 20 minutes, what happens is the transaction gets confirmed. Similarly, I sent the other part to a website Bitcoin address in Israel. And similarly, I get a notification. We've received first notification that some Bitcoin is incoming. We're going to wait until it's had 5 or 6 confirmations, they're called. And after about 20-25 minutes, my Bitcoin is available on this site in Israel. And pretty much immediately, I sold it. And I sold it for Israeli shekels. So in the space of about 40 minutes, I've gone from £1,000 in the UK to corresponding shekels in Israel. Done all the maths. I don't think it was dramatically cheaper than the banks. It seems that the way I bought the shekels in Israel wasn't optimal. I've got bits to learn about that. Could have waited a bit. It doesn't really matter. I didn't lose, I didn't gain, but it happened very quickly. And I think the money will be in my bank account today in Israel, which is quicker than even the most expensive way of sending international. So it works. Now, the reason I did this is because I need to try all these things out. We're not at the point yet, which we need to be, which is that if you want to fund a creator that you like for $5 a month or $20 a month, this system of being able to buy yourself some digital currency and send it, that is definitely going to be a disruptive technology. Now, what's happened is that the banks, the credit card companies, they are making it as hard as they can to stop adoption of this. Now, there's a very nice site. It doesn't look very nice, but it's got functionality called bitbacker.io. I've got an account there. That basically does Patreon with crypto. that model is very hard to take them out of the payment processing network because they're not in it. It's a site where you pledge to give somebody $5 worth of Bitcoin or some other crypto currency. And there's absolutely nothing around that can stop that transaction from happening. Just like when I sent my Bitcoin from Coinbase to my own private wallet, once it's in my private wallet on my computer, I can send it to literally any Bitcoin address in the world and nobody can stop me. You cannot stop me paying that Bitcoin to someone. Right. Now, the problem comes when you want to turn the Bitcoin into fiat currency, and this is what they're going to be trying to suppress, because that's where the control point is. But if you've got somebody like Sargon and they're trying to deplatform him, well, it's going to be very difficult, because all he has to do is find some local person he trusts to open a Coinbase account. And there's always a way around that kind of deplatforming with the technology that already exists. Now, I don't care what the price of Bitcoin does. It didn't move very much in the 20 minutes whilst I held it. I'm not exposed to the risk of Bitcoin that much. Don't think that the entire entity is going to collapse while I was holding it. I don't think it's going to collapse at all, actually, because the way it works. Oh, and the transaction costs of the actual Bitcoin transactions. Last year, when the price ran up to $15,000 or whatever it was, the transaction costs became ridiculous. But during my transfers the other night of £1,000, they were immeasurable. I to 7 decimal places, the number of Bitcoin I put into the system is the number of Bitcoin I got out. The only fees I paid were fees to exchanges when I made transactions changing it from Bitcoin to a fiat currency. So this stuff's all there, it's all working. I don't think that fighting with the payment processors, which is probably what Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin are going to do, I mean, they'll probably have successes in the short term. They might get something up and running, but I'm nervous about their business from the business point of view, because it relies on this sort of network thing. They'll only be able to run the business if it's making money on the network effect. And the other part about this whole Bitcoin transaction, which is an intellectual one, is with Patreon, you go on Patreon and you give $5 and you don't see the quite large cut that Patreon were taking. Your $5 turned into $3 by the time it got to whoever you were sending it to. Patreon were taking more than 5% plus processing fees. But the person who saw that was the receiver. In all the current systems that I can think of setting up that are involved a Bitcoin type transaction, it is the person sending the money who would see the deduction. And so you don't really want to be buying $5 of Bitcoin and sending it individually to people. If you bought, but you will see the deduction. The other person won't, actually, funnily enough. The recipient. So it's a very intellectual difference as to where the fees of the transaction actually come. But overall, the fees for doing it via a crypto should be lower. But it just seems that nobody has made this cross-national and easy yet. But there are Bitcoin buying facilities and other crypto buying facilities in just about every country. You can do it with credit cards. The fees are higher. So we're almost there. And I'm going to put a little bit of... I am going to put a bit more effort into explaining this. I'll do a video about the actual transaction I did. And perhaps I'll speak with some of the Bitcoin people who are sort of deep in that world, and just see if we can't come together and make it so easy that we can start shifting a few people away from the old models of support and towards something new that is much, much harder to stop. Anyway, I hope that wasn't too long and rambly. Some of you stuck with it. I shall stick this up later. I'm Brian of London. If you want to find me, you can find me on Smartcash.io. Have a look. Brian of London, I'm there. I'm also on a thing called Steam, which is like a social media platform built around blockchain and crypto. And if you want any more information about that, DM me on Twitter, Brian of London on Twitter. And hopefully we're gonna beat these bastards back. I think we can, actually. I think all the tools are in place. We just have to sew them together right. And the way to do that is not wait for a big new company that will come along and solve all your problems for you. No, we're going to put pieces of the puzzle together ourselves, like we did in the early days of the internet, and root around the problem. I'm Brian of London. This is Tel Aviv Forest. I'm in Israel. I'm an indigenous Jew who came home, and I'll see you next time.